Hi, I'm John Paul, and I just wanted to say welcome generally and to anyone coming over from Katie's channel. I regularly produce content on a range of emotional well-being and general mental health topics about being and becoming a therapist as well, and also have various conversations with other people. I really hope you enjoy the conversation I had with Katie. If you did like it, maybe take a look around the channel afterwards. I'm sure there'll be other things of interest to you here as well, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Hi, I'm John Paul, and a really warm welcome back to my channel. I'm always delighted to have other therapists come on for conversations on the channel, but today I have to say I'm particularly delighted because of the extraordinary guest that I have on. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the US. I think the West Coast of the US, is a best-selling author, has a new book coming out soon as well. I think in December, perhaps we'll mention that. Very significantly for where you're watching, she is a YouTube content creator, has had extraordinary success, almost up to 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube now, and the videos have been watched by millions of people all over the world. And I'm sure there are lots of other strings to her bow as well. Her name is Katie Morton. If you didn't already know, Katie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I was actually watching a conversation which you had. I can't remember the name of the guy you were speaking to, but he asked you about how you got into YouTube, particularly originally. And you said it was your boyfriend, now husband, who was really encouraging you to go on at the time. And I think you said in that conversation, like all good therapists, I didn't want to at first. So there was obviously conflict, initially internally. So just starting there, I guess, what was that about for you? What was the reluctance?
I think I had reluctance because as a therapist, we're not always supposed to be the seen person or the
Mm,
public person. We are kind of behind the scenes, right? We're like the secret supporters. And even as like sessions go, it's not about us, right? It's about our patients, our clients, it's about
mm,
their process. And so I think the thought that I would be the face of something or even being on camera too is it's funny thinking back now because it's been so many years, but it was never like a goal of mine. A lot of other YouTube creators are like, "Oh, I've always
mhm.
wanted to be an actress or I always wanted to be a singer or something." I no, I did not. It is not. I think it's just very opposite of as therapists how we're trained and as me as a person. It has always been a little bit uncomfortable, although I've obviously overcome but it's been 14 years. So
14 years, okay. And I suppose to overcome it over time, I mean, you've invested a lot of time in it and continue to do that. So, what has been the motivation for that as time has gone on?
throughout the years, I guess because the way that my channel's grown, I never had like a viral hit. And I don't say that as like, oh, woe is me. I say it more as like I was an adult. I chose to put myself online
Mhm,
and it grew slowly and steadily as a community. And so, and because I guess furthermore, because when I started the channel, you couldn't make money, it wasn't like a business decision. It was more of,
mhm,
as weird as it sounds, like a hobby, like something that I thought should just exist.
mhm,
And I think because of all those factors, the why behind my reason for creating has always been that like, hey, if I can just reach one person and help them, if
mhm,
somebody's looking for information and they can't afford care, I hope they come across this and this is helpful. I think
mhm.
having that why be the foundation of it all has is consistently the motivator
Yeah.
because otherwise you get wrapped up in algorithms. Oh, my video views have been down, or oh, I got a troll, a hate message.
Mm,
Those things could really sidetrack you or, make you want to stop. But I think for me, I know my community. I still, every video I put out, think, oh, if one person needed this and couldn't figure it out and they got it through this video, it was worth all the effort.
mm.
Um, and I think that's always kind of helped me stay grounded, but also can help me continue even when times are tough.
Just more generally in life, or have there been moments, I suppose, during your, did you say 14 years?
Yeah.
Have there been moments during that where you thought, oh, why am I doing this? I don't, or did it really build up a momentum and just went from strength to strength?
No, it's definitely up and down. It's like a roller coaster. I don't want
Yeah.
anybody to think it's like this nice curve of it's just been go, 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 growth, growth, growth. There's definitely lulls. I think just like any I consider it like a small business, even just like a private practice. Like when I ran my private practice full time, you have lulls like where patients graduate and it's amazing and you're excited, but then you have these holes in your schedule and you're like, wow, my Tuesdays, I only have 3 people, huh? And so there's definitely been these ebbs and flows in the as a business, but then even as a person, it's a lot of content to create and it's a lot of myself to put out there. And I've definitely had, like, I remember when my first book, Are You Okay, came out. I want to say it was December of 2017. I was totally burnt out. I'd been working too much. I created a book and I was creating content, and I definitely felt like a low point. And I try to share that as well because I don't want people to think that just because I'm a therapist, like my life is just perfect and I have everything together. Um,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm still human, we're all sharing in this human experience. And so that was definitely a tough time. And I've had moments like anybody where I'm like, oh, do I still want to keep doing this? It's so exhausting. And sometimes I'm so burnt out, or you get a really nasty comment and you're like, do I want to?
Mm.
But I just go back to that why. And that's really what keeps me moving forward.
You mentioned being a therapist as well. What's your average week like now? Just have an idea about that. Do you still see a number of clients?
As times have changed, I'm essentially a licensed therapist. My specialty is actually lie and treat the treatment of eating disorders and self-injury. So a lot
Okay.
of my patients were, struggling with those types of issues. I also saw a bunch of people with anxiety, bipolar disorder, you name it. I no longer hold a private practice. I still keep my licenses both active. Have a license in California and in Texas. But because of the travel is what really ended up making it too difficult for me. Previous to COVID, I used to speak a lot and travel a lot. And so it made it really hard to be consistent for my patients, which is, I think, one of the most important pieces of therapy. So I let go of my private practice, I mean, with COVID in 2020.
What was it like to let go of your private practice? What's that been like?
Hard.
Hmm.
It was slow. The thing that was kind of nice about it is I had a couple of patients go away to college.
Okay.
And so we got to refer them out and I got to transition them nicely. And so
Hmm.
that felt good. And then a couple patients like, oh, they just pop in and out. So they were graduating from therapy for a bit. But the last few patients that I'd been seeing for the longest was probably the hardest, I think, for me and for them. And there's always this fear, I think, like I don't want to lose touch with the clinical work,
Hmm.
but I felt like it was unethical for me to keep going and not be able to give them what I consider a standard of care for myself. And so I think the last session was scary and sad. And packing up my office was even more sad. Um, but I feel like sometimes when you say no to one thing, you open up room for a big yes, and it's definitely been super cool to get to go and speak and see people's faces. And instead of just the one-to-one, it can be 1 to 100. And that impact has been really fulfilling for me and really wonderful. I do sometimes miss it and I can always go back. That's why I keep my licenses active. But for right now, I'm happy with the decision I made.
Whilst you were doing that, whilst you were a people's therapist and also doing some content, I have watched some of your videos, of course, and also a conversation which you had. You will disclose things that have happened to you in life, and obviously feel emotionally and express that and those things. And whilst you were seeing clients as well, what was that like combining? Because sometimes if I'm on a podcast with somebody and it's another therapist, they may ask me something which I know is pretty personal or it's relevant to the conversation, and I find myself answering because it can be quite it's a sort of personal conversation, isn't it? And then I think afterwards, well, that's now delivered into my therapeutic relationships with, even if I wouldn't say anything that I think if I disclosed it would be problematic, but I guess you never quite know for clients. So I wondered what that process was like for you. Would you inhibit things that you set, or did you always have sort of rules in mind to navigate that?
That's a great question. And to be truthful, if you watch I mean, don't watch my early videos, they're super cringy. But if you watch the first, let's say, 5 or 6 years, I don't share much about myself.
Ah.
And for that very reason, that I think it is important for therapists, for us to be truly effective, to be kind of blank slates for people.
Mm.
And I know people can have different opinions. I just believe in that because I would never want a patient not to share something with me because they're like, oh, I know they think this kind of way, or they believe that kind of way,
Yeah.
or they have this own personal experience. And so it wasn't until I had let go of my practice. I don't know if it was almost finished or completely let go. My last few patients, it's funny, didn't even know I had a YouTube.
Really?
Depending on what people are looking for, right? That's just not how they sought it out. I had a patient who'd seen me for years and he'd come in and out and take breaks, and he came back once. He's like, "Oh my God, you're online." He didn't know, and I'd seen him for years. So, I tried to hold that stuff back as much as possible until I had let that go, because I do think still again that being a blank slate is really important. I don't put anything out there that I think would deter someone, but you never know. Like you said, you
Yeah.
just don't know. So it is definitely something that also made it felt necessary to let go of the private practice piece. Um,
Mm.
there's also this interesting, and we can talk about this more if you want, but like I think there's an interesting thing too where over the years, when people would find me online and then find my practice and set up an appointment, there would be this like kind of belief that I could fix them. And I know people can have that thought
Mm.
anyways when it comes to therapy and the therapeutic work, but it's almost like they saw me in a celebrity light, which
Sure.
to me then makes the relationship offset and not as therapeutically beneficial for them.
Well, I mean, it's quite a different energy as well, isn't it? To
Mhm.
to be explaining something, to be talking through something, is quite different to perhaps what they would see in a therapy room. As I said, there might be an expectation that you will do what you do on a video, which is to run through something and explain it, and up comes some
And like
text and
in 10 minutes or less.
exactly. But it's a very different part, isn't it? I think that. So I can imagine somebody might be doing that. They have certain expectations about how you'll be, which
Yeah.
could be different.
Yeah.
Just out of interest, I know you said you don't practice anymore, but in terms of the kind of training in the US and the kind of modalities and that sort of thing, what sort of things are involved in the training?
We have, so obviously I have my master's, so it depends on the people's level of education. What
Yeah.
that means is that I got my undergraduate degree 4 years and then did 2 more years of a graduate program focused on psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy, because that was my path.
Hmm. Yeah.
Upon completion of that, and actually during that, you start seeing patients, you start seeing clients, and gaining your hours towards licensure. So in the
Mm.
state of California, where I went to school and where I got my license, that meant 3,000 hours, and you
Yeah.
have 6 years to do it. And it took me about 4.5 or 5 years to do it, because I still worked a job to pay bills, and it's a very tricky time. um, but then you have to gain a certain amount of child hours. I want to say it was 250 or something. You had to do certain paperwork. You had to take certain suicide prevention courses and sexual assault courses and all these different kinds of extra learnings, and then sit your exams. And ours, I don't know how yours are structured. I'd love to hear of how different.
Mm. Mm.
We have two exams. And they have to be 6 months apart. So the first one is the written. That was the one that gave me the most anxiety, because it's essentially like, what therapeutic tool was used here? What's the first step you would take in the situation? And you
Yeah.
have A, B, C, D, and there's 200 and something questions, and you have a set amount of time. And so I went to courses for this, and I took practice exams.
Mm.
And then you have to wait 6 months, and then you take what it's funny, because by the time I took the next part of the exam, which is they call it vignettes, clinical vignettes. So it's like you get a patient profile, and then you
Mm.
have to answer questions based on that profile.
Mm.
And when you pass both exams, you get your license. But the clinical vignette used to be in person, where you would meet with another clinician and they would ask you the questions.
So couldn't predict, of course, what they would ask or.
No, but mine was on computer. I'm very grateful. I think I was only like, they'd only stopped doing it, let's say like 2 years or 3 years before I had to do it. So,
I see. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is quite different in the UK. I mean, I don't know if you know, but in the UK, you don't have to. Psychotherapist isn't a protected title. Therapist. Anybody can call
you're,
themselves. You don't need
you're
to follow.
kidding.
No. So it's voluntary regulation. But I mean, the vast majority of people that I know would do that. But I know people that didn't qualify and still see clients and are 10 years later not qualified. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because ours therapist is protected, but you can be like a coach. A lot of people are life
Yeah. Sure.
coaches, and that's not necessarily protected. You can just say,
No.
people do get certifications, but you don't have to.
Yeah, it's all changing. There's something called the scope of education. So I think at some point in the next few years, there will be statutory, well, some sort of more stringent regulation, but it just relies on people to do it themselves. So as
Oh,
far as
I had
modality,
no idea.
yeah, anyone. Just going back to the kind of the YouTube work,
Mhm.
content, choosing content for you. I think, there is, of course, what your community will be asking for. Presumably, people ask questions. I imagine you get lots of questions. Then there's what you would want to, which may overlap, of course, with your community. That sort of internally, what interests you and what you'd like to produce content on. And then I guess there's the algorithm. Like somebody on YouTube would tell me to go to Katie Morton's channel and look at her most successful videos and then produce content similar to that. Just from and I suppose the algorithm is really speaking for people anyway. But
Yeah.
just all the way through, how have you chosen content?
Yeah, it's varied over the years.
Mm,
Um, I definitely, all the things you mentioned, I've done.
mm,
I definitely speak to my audience a lot, and for the most part, I would say 60 to 70% of the time, the audience leads it
mm,
because they're the people who are watching them anyways. And if they have questions or concerns, then I'm going to let that guide what I focus on. But
mm.
then to your point, there are definitely videos I create just for me, like
Okay.
things that I'm interested in or terms I hear online. Like I created a video about eldest daughter syndrome because I'm the only daughter, so it's just me and my brother. I'm the younger
Okay.
of the two, but
Mm,
technically I'm still the eldest daughter, and a lot of that resonated with me, a lot of
mm,
the signs and the things that we do. And so I went down a deep dive reading about it, learning about it, and then made a video about it because I was interested. And
mm.
so it really just depends on it, but I'd say 70/30 is probably a good split. I never make anything for the algorithm. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but something that I was told a while ago that has kind of stuck with me is that we need to replace the word algorithm with audience.
Sure. Yeah.
So you make things for the audience, and I already feel like I do that. I
Mm,
like I communicate with my community all the time, and I
mm,
feel like that has always, not to say that's like the secret of my success, but I definitely feel like that's a part of it, is that connectivity. Because then when I'm looking or reading a new article or oh, I got this email about this new study, I'm like, would
mm,
they be interested in this? And I can
mm.
picture people, and I'm like, no, or yes,
Okay.
let's dig in.
Have there been things that really surprised you, content you've produced, which has done very well that you thought wouldn't, and vice versa, I suppose?
Both sides. I I put a ton of effort into so many videos over the years. One comes to mind is the Ozempic craze because I do eating
Ah,
disorder content a lot.
yeah.
I put so much effort into that video, doing research into like the history of diets and like how
Mm.
they've come through our world and marketing and all of this stuff. It just totally flopped.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I really had fun researching it. We put so much time and effort, total flop. And then I will sometimes sit down because I just have a thought. Like today, I've been thinking about hate and the hate
Yeah.
that we live in and talking about that. And I may, after we finish today, just riff on a video. And sometimes I'll do that. I don't call that zero effort, but it's just not as much work. And those tend to do the best sometimes. And I think it kind of speaks to the connectivity and like the realness that really connects with people, but also
Mm,
content. So yes, that's why I feel like if we try to make for the algorithm, we try to create for, you know, something we're not interested in, it will show and it won't do well.
mm.
And you just also can't predict. You just have to do it because you want to do it.
Completely, yeah. And as you say, that sort of individual connection with a comment from a person, I think, can make a huge amount of difference, can't it? In terms of motivating to carry on, I think, of course, those would be lovely comments that might come from people. You did mention trolls or somebody, being critical. What has that been like for you? I mean, how do you manage that again? How do you navigate it? Because I would occasionally, on certain videos, somebody I was obviously annoyed about something, and sometimes I would choose to engage, depending on how they frame it. If
Mhm.
somebody's just, it doesn't happen often, but it's just puts an insult there, then I probably would remove it. But just from your point of view, how would you? I mean, the volume of comments you must have had, and I think you probably do live streams and all kinds of other things as well. So there's all of this input, I imagine you get. How do you navigate?
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning. Um, I'm glad I started when I was an adult and I chose to do this. Like I made a
Mm,
conscious decision to
mm,
create because I think if it came from a different place, I might have a different answer or it might
mm,
have caused me to stop. Um, I usually do not respond. That's the first because I know it's not about me.
mm,
And I just try to hold that truth in my mind when I read things like that. I, for the most part, get lovely comments. So
yeah.
I get in and I comment back. And on live streams, I've yet to get a nasty comment. I mean, knock on wood. Don't want to set myself up now. Um, but by and large, it's wonderful. I think the
Mm,
negative comments, because I've been online for so long, like they come in waves and people will disagree with something you said or and I welcome disagreement and I welcome discourse, but I don't welcome hate or, essentially like slander and things like that. And so
yeah.
I feel like I'm happy to engage with someone when they don't agree or they think that what I'm talking about is something else. Always open to learn.
Mm,
But it is hard. I'm still human. I mean, there have been a couple of times in particular where there was more hate than before, and it's really taxing. It's like the only way I can describe it to people who haven't experienced it and hope you never have to is like if there's an influx of people leaving disparaging comments, it really wears down your resilience. It's like
mm,
exhausting in a strange way. And so,
mm,
and it's also just hard. I mean, I'm still human. I think sometimes people forget that when I leave
mm.
a comment, like there's another human that receives that.
Sure.
So that definitely was taxing at the time. Although I have to say, like, again, 90% has always been lovely. And so I just have to lean into that. And sometimes if I am feeling a little down, I'll do a live stream, which I know sounds like counterintuitive, but that connects me with the real audience. And that reminds me that, like, hey,
Mm,
you're still making an impact, that what you're doing is still important. Not everybody's going to like you. And that's just regular life, you know?
yeah.
And one of my friends had a really good, I forget what we were talking about, but she had said something to the effect of like, the internet is a strange place because when we usually grow up and develop and build a life, we're only really subjected to these groups of people that maybe we work with, maybe
Yeah.
our kids go to school with, and our community. And it's a pretty small circle.
Mm,
And she goes, but the internet means that we're subjected or, connected with everybody. And she's like,
mm.
no one is supposed to receive that much feedback. And I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing I always try to remind
Mm.
myself. I'm like, it's not normal. That's why it doesn't feel good.
Definitely, and of course there is that disinhibiting effect, I suppose, when somebody can't be seen face to face, and it's just tapping away. I also think it does work the other way, though. I sometimes think that I imagine some people say really lovely things that they wouldn't say if it was to face, because there's also they're not
True.
inhibited again by face to face contact. Some of the nicest things I've heard in some ways have been comments that have been tapped away, and it's really strange because I think, there's no name. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they look like. I don't know where they are. I don't know what gender they are. And there's still this, and there's something lovely about that, I think. Navigating it all, have you done all that yourself? Or do you have a kind of, was there somebody who mentored you, or have you just worked it all out as you went along yourself?
I just learned as I went.
Mm.
When we started the channel, my husband does all of the filming, editing, like the production piece. And so I created the content and he did that. And that's what we've honestly been doing for 14 years. And we have people on the team that help out in other ways, but there was no, to be truthful, I'm not saying I was the first to ever do this, but I was definitely the first that I knew of. There was no other clinicians that I saw in the space creating for a long time. And so there wasn't really anybody to follow. I definitely leaned into the creator community when it comes, we call ourselves edutubers, like educational
Okay.
creators. That was definitely a support in those early years because there weren't any other therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists,
Mm.
there was nobody. And
Mm.
that community was always really welcoming and it was really cool to learn from them. And that's really the best like mentors I had.
Was that online? Well, presumably it would have been, but you would meet online. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'd see each other. The beautiful thing about YouTube that I think some people maybe forget or they weren't around for is that back in the early days, so I would even argue until like 2016, 2017, so probably the first like 5 or 6 years of me being online, we would get together all the time. Like VidCon, we had these events and
Mm.
conferences, and I
Oh,
know those still
really?
exist. They're just very different now.
Mm.
Because back then it was like the same people at every event. And so they became really good friends of yours. And the creator community felt like a nice, cool little, I don't know, friend group, for lack of a better term. And we would share in like, oh, have you tried this? Or I got this new camera. Have you looked at that? And like all sorts of information. Or I hired somebody using this site. That's how you can find people. Like just sharing in information. And I think I'm really grateful that I started when I did, because now it is so overpopulated that it can kind of, I think the connectivity is a little trickier. It might take a little bit
Mm.
longer to find your people, but that definitely helped early on.
I mean, I speak to people, with therapists who, looking at videos, and they would say, "Oh, could never do that." I mean, some people just don't want to do it, do they? But other people who may perhaps for sort of self-disclosure get worried about sitting in front of a camera. It's not a particularly natural thing necessarily with a bright light shining in your face. What would you say to somebody who? What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about it but just has that sort of reluctance?
Yeah, it's interesting. My friends are the same, my colleagues. Some
Right.
people are like, "Oh, I could never," and other people are like, "I don't know how you do that."
Yeah.
If they're thinking about it, I always want to encourage people to do it and
Mm.
lean into our community, especially with the therapists and psychologists on Instagram and YouTube. It is really, we are pretty connected now, and we are kind of
Mm.
like our own little niche. So reach out, whether that's in comments on something, like
Mm.
people will see you, and then that will make you feel less weird or less alone.
Mm.
The reason I really want people to do it, to start, to create their own channel is because everybody wants a different flavor, right? I'm not going to work for everybody. They're not all going to like me, and
Mm.
different strokes for different folks. And I really think that the more variety we put out there, the more viewpoints, then essentially the more access people have. I really think that it's important for different viewpoints and different backgrounds to all have a voice, so that when someone goes looking for something, they can be like, "Oh, that person either looks like me, talks the way I talk, or I really like what they said this way,"
Yeah.
and that will ensure that, people get the support that they're looking for.
Yeah. For you, how would it have shaped you, the sort of social media side of things? I guess professionally, but also personally, has
Mhm.
it changed things for you?
Definitely changed things for me. I think professionally, I I mean, it'd be silly to say it hasn't changed me. I think it's challenged me to learn about things that maybe I never would have tried to, because I do find, at least in the States, therapists can get niched out really quickly, which I was like, eating disorder referrals aplenty. There's not a lot of therapists, even in the LA area, that understand truly and can treat eating disorders. So you can fill your whole practice with those patients. But then that means that I kind of have blinders on to other things a lot of times, because it just doesn't come up in my practice. I'm not challenged to read about it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do a continuing, we have to do CEUs, or continuing education,
Mhm.
to continue our license to hold it. And so I wouldn't do those CEUs on things that wouldn't apply to my practice. And so I think in many ways it's broadened me, and it's challenged me to think outside the box, to learn more. And overall, I think the biggest like change in my professional life is that it's made me realize more than ever that we don't know anything. Like clinicians, you have to listen to your patients. Like some of the biggest insights I've learned over the years are through Reddit threads of people helping each other. They're
Yes.
like, "Oh my God, I know this sounds weird, but when I feel anxious, I do X, Y, or Z." And I can read that and I'm like, that works because
Mm.
your nervous system is soothed. Fascinating. And like, I would never have thought of that. And so
Mm.
it's really, I used to say back in the day on my videos, I'd be like, it's with your experience and my expertise that we keep working together towards a healthy
Yeah.
mind and a healthy body. And that's really been the biggest learning professionally. I'd say personally, it it's challenged me in certain ways. Like I have to get better with making time for myself, because
Mm.
when you work, I mean, in general, I think with work, people can be like, there's always more to do. But when you are online, there's always more you can do, like exponentially. And I have to get better at carving out time for myself, because I have noticed if I don't take care of myself, then my content reflects that. And then it's not doing well. And so it's almost like if I'm not doing well, then everything doesn't do well. So that's made me be a little bit more intentional about how I spend my time.
I mean, I was saying about your week and things. Just is there an average week for you, or does it really vary?
It varies some. I guess it depends if it's a filming week or not, but
Hmm.
an average week is a lot of different calls, just going over content or talking it like talking to you, doing interviews and things like that, or interviewing other people. But a lot of it's like research, either script creation or video ideation, just like bullet points of like what I want to cover. That takes up a huge amount of my time. And then depending on if it's I'm book writing and things like that, those have to factor in. Um, like I'm working on a workshop right now, so I'm putting that together for an organization. I'll spend a few hours. I try to divvy up the time that I have to do creative work. I try to put those like little bits every day because I know that I can't do it for more than a few hours at a time.
Okay.
Um, yeah, definitely a lot of that. And then a lot of, I mean, the content creation piece is huge, like filming videos, trying to figure out what the thumbnail is going to be, what the title is going to be.
Do you do that then, or is someone helping you as well, or is that all you?
Yeah, my husband does that, but we work on it together. So it's
Uh,
like he'll have some ideas, I'll have some ideas, we'll throw them out. We also have a team that we work with that we'll talk it out to with them just to see if we think it resonates. Like, hey, do you like this? Does that make you interested, or do you like that? Um, so yeah, just a lot of essentially what I would call like testing, assessment, research, all with the goal of creating better content.
so this obviously worked very well. In terms of burnout, I think you mentioned it before. How do you build in other things to like? Because I always think I do love seeing clients as well. I enjoy lots of aspects of doing this and various other things. So it's quite easy to think, well, because I love doing this, it's not really work in some ways. Equally, it's still an obligation and time commitments, and even if you don't want to do something at times, you have to do it. I guess there is within all of that as well, even if you're doing something which you really enjoy, the potential for burning out with everything else that's happening in life, and personal circumstances can change and all those things. And I just wonder for you, how do you manage it? Because you've been able to sustain this in a very successful way for well over a decade.
It's hard. I wish I could tell people, oh, it's easy. One, two, three, this is how you do it. But it definitely is hard because I know the people always say like, oh, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And I'm like,
Yes.
that's not really true. You definitely feel more fulfilled, so you
Mm,
can do it for longer.
mm,
However, that usually means boundaries are blurred and you work at times when you probably shouldn't.
mm,
I used to be so good, and kudos to like my supervisors and mentors over the years. I used to be so regimented about like I leave the office after I've done all my notes, and I leave work at work. Like I leave it. I had like a routine. I would walk home. I'd get a coffee. I'd go around and I'd like it's like my decompression. And I'd get home, boom,
mhm.
switch over. Used to be really, really good at that. But now that I work for myself, it's not as good. And
Yes.
I really feel the effects. And so it's kind of trying to get back to that. Like, how do I set up these boundaries around when I
Yeah.
work and when I don't? And
Mm,
so I just never want anybody to think that, oh, if you love something, it's not work. Because to your
mm.
point, you still have to show up. And even if I'm kind of down in energy one day, I have to be there for people. I made commitments. I said,
Sure.
I told people that I would do this and I booked that meeting
Mm,
or I planned that workshop. I have to show up and be my best. And I think it is kind of like adulting, but it's also just a commitment, and loving what you do makes it more enjoyable, but it doesn't mean that it's always enjoyable.
mm. So obviously the YouTubing is you've enjoyed that over the years. You've also written a couple of books, and there's a new one
Yes.
coming out as well.
Yes, I have written three books. My first book, Are You Okay, that I mentioned earlier, came out in I think 2017. Then
Hmm.
Traumatized, it came out in 2021. And my third book, Why Do I Keep Doing This, comes out December 9th.
Fantastic.
And this is probably it's different than my other books. This is probably my most personal book. Instead of it being a prescriptive, like here's what you need to do, this is what research tells us, it's
Mm,
more like come along on this journey with me. Let me walk you through things that I struggle with, experiences I've had, experiences members of my community have had, and let's talk about like what we kind of know and what we still don't know, or essentially why do we keep doing
mm,
these same things and acting in these ways that aren't helpful. This one is definitely more personal, which makes me a little bit more anxious, but it also feels kind of cathartic. I almost feel like it's like the culmination of a lot of my own therapeutic work. is
Mm.
this book. And like a lot of the things that I've learned about myself, the things that I've worked so hard to try to change or alter, and just it's kind of like a personal understanding journey and learning how to do better tomorrow. And so each chapter kind of dives into a different piece of what of my patterns. Like I talk about perfectionism, I talk about people pleasing, I talk about shrinking myself to fit spaces I shouldn't be in. I
Mhm.
talk about having discomfort with conflict and how being conflict averse has affected my life.
Mm.
Um, Not enjoying the feeling of anger and my weird relationship with anger. Yeah, so I definitely dive into a lot of personal things, but there's a ton of other stories too for my community because my goal with the book is for every reader to see part of themselves in it and find it
Mm.
helpful on their own journey.
It sounds great, and it does. You have always, it seems, covered a broad range of subjects. You mentioned niching about, but and there is always that. And of course, sometimes the if you're looking at YouTube, particularly, the algorithm might say, "Well, this has been a very successful piece of content. Why don't you do some more of that and some more of the same?" But I mean, even in that book, there's a breadth of things as far as anger and yeah, all kinds of things which you seem to cover. Because I suppose that's the holistic human being as well, isn't it? They're all parts of us potentially.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I learned. I mean, early on, even as a therapist, but also on YouTube, nothing happens in a vacuum. A few videos are just about eating disorders.
Mm.
And I mean, I know as well as I'm sure, and many clinicians know that eating disorders aren't the only thing. It's usually a coping skill for something else going
Mm.
on. And so that could be anxiety, that could be depression, that could be bipolar disorder, it could be any number of ailments and issues that we're struggling with in our life. And so I think that's always been like the guiding light of the channel, and feeling like I wanted all people to know that they're welcome there and that nothing happens on its own, and it's okay for you to have this and that, or this sometimes and struggle with that the other time.
Mm.
Yeah, kind of just hopefully validating the human experience.
Absolutely. And the book itself, does it give some practical ideas for moving through those things too?
That's something I've always tried to do, is like take a complex psychological
Mm.
idea and make it digestible for like everyday
Mm.
people. Um,
Mm.
and in the book, it's funny because I didn't want to do any of that. And my editor, Dan, at the time, he was like, I miss the things at the end of the chapters. You always do takeaways. You need to give us a little bit. And I'm like, okay. So that was like, I think I was only a few chapters in. So I went back and added in. So at the end of each chapter, there are some like essentially journal prompts.
Mm.
Then, because the thread of the book is control, or the illusion of control that we have on life, I have
Mm.
a control challenge. And so it's kind of like based on the topic that we discussed, like try this out, see if you can do it, or see what comes up for you when you try to do it this way.
Mm. You mentioned an editor there, and I suppose you producing something and somebody coming in and saying, "Well, could you do this differently, or maybe try this?" What's that like for you? That process?
The book writing process has been an interesting one. I love Dan. He worked with me on all three of my books, and then halfway through this one, he went to a different publisher, and I got switched over to Diana, who I also love.
Mm.
Um, but having Dan throughout all of them, he was really wonderful. I didn't he's so great at the way that he offers that like critique or edit, that it
Mm.
never felt I never felt defensive about it. And he would even say like, "Oh, your example about blank really spoke to me because I did this." Like he was such a champion of the work that I did that it always felt like he was working with me to make it better. And so
Yeah.
that was just really great. I'm sure other authors might have different experiences, but I was
Mm.
really lucky in this way. The trickiest part sometimes though is when he's like, this chapter is a little long, so we're gonna have to cut some things. And I'm like, oh, that would always be hard.
Uh,
But
yeah.
so yeah, we do our best to keep most of it in, but at the end of the day, we have like limits, and they're trying to make it flow and keep things going. And sometimes
Mm.
a chapter will get away from me, and it's supposed to be 25 pages, and I've written 34. And he's like, we're gonna have to
And
figure.
he would ask you to do that, would he, but rather than do that
He
himself?
would sometimes
Yeah.
take a stab. He'd take a stab at first and see, and then say, if you see a different way, let me know.
Okay. Has there ever been disagreement in it as far as the content?
Yes, a lot of times I'll push back on certain things, like, I
Yeah.
can't say it that way, that's not the way that a therapist would say something. And I have to give Dan and the editing team credit that, like, they do give in. to that.
Yes.
I can only think of like two instances where they didn't think we should add this in. And I was like, no, that's really important because that's the validation piece. Otherwise, it feels
Mm.
more judgmental. And I'd give them a reason. They'd be like, oh, I didn't think about it. Oh, okay.
Mm.
And then they could see what I meant. But most of the time, it's been really collaborative and really wonderful. And I'm thankful because I have heard other stories and that's just has not been my experience.
Mm. But again, it does go back whilst you're talking to that thing about how a therapist might say something, and then also the expectations that somebody might have of a personal development book. They could be quite different, can't they? So, I mean, I just self-published a kind of self-help book, and I did get an editor to have a look at it. And the whole way I wrote it was all, maybe I wonder if, or perhaps, and she said, no, if somebody's going to buy that book, you need to say you and in this situation and that kind of thing. And it was quite at that point, I still have a private practice of sitting with clients, but to be not directive, but to be a lot more explicit about things in that way can be a difficult, yeah.
Yeah, it is very difficult because that's not how we talk. That's not
Sure.
because everything is gray. We live in the gray.
We
We
do.
don't live in black and white. And I'm the first to say like, the person who's the most sure of themselves is probably the most wrong. Like you don't know what you don't know. And I agree with you, like the possiblies, the maybes, the way that I've kind of gotten around that, and something that I implement in general in my channel is making it inclusive. So I'll say things like, often like
Mm.
we as humans
Yeah.
do this, that, or the other, but I do still throw in the like, it's possible. And we often, you would never say that they always, or
Yeah.
that this is the way that it works, but it is tricky, a little bit more discern, a little bit more direct, a little bit more sure than we
Mm.
probably would in practice.
Yeah. So, I mean, the process of writing, it does make you firm up ideas as well in terms of your own internal views about things, doesn't it? I
Yes.
imagine also writing content for YouTube, you have to really know what you think about something.
You do, and how can you teach it to someone? That's something
Mhm.
that I struggle with sometimes because it's like I'll have an idea in my head, but it would be better it's better as a discussion, like you and me talking, and then
Mhm.
we can talk it through and we get it
Mhm.
out. Um,
Mhm.
whereas a video is like a one-sided conversation, and so you have to be clear about like where am I taking you along? And yeah, if I don't know what I think or feel about something, it will not go well. Like the video
Yes.
won't do well and I don't feel good about it. Yeah, I do. It does force me. I mean, that's why I think I journal almost every day.
Ah.
It does for I have to be in touch with who I am and what I'm wanting to do and how I think about things. And sometimes that takes a little extra
Mm.
work. I did the artist's way, which is like this workbook.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it.
Mm.
Julia Cameron's amazing. And so I did that about 2 years ago. And so I did morning pages for a long time still, but I'm not a morning person. And I found that if I would like in my brain was like, you have to do it in the morning, then they wouldn't get done. And so I moved it to do it when you have a lull. So it's usually like after I've done my early morning meetings or plannings, then I'll journal or towards the end of my day, maybe at more like 4 or 5 o'clock when I'm wrapping things up.
Okay. Okay. Just out of interest, AI, I know lots of people talking about it. Do you incorporate that anywhere in what you do?
Not yet. I mean, other than I would assume like regular people where I'll like write an email and then I'll put it in and be like, is this
Yeah.
clear?
Yes.
Is this saying what needed to say? I definitely use it that way. I am hopeful for AI. I know a lot of people are scared or frustrated by it. It's happening whether or not we want it to. I feel like it's almost like social media back in the day when people were like, I'm not putting myself out, I don't, this
Mm.
is silly. I'm
Mm.
like, it's happening. Um,
Mm.
and I am hopeful that it can be just as YouTube and social media has become for many people, it can be a wonderful support
Yeah.
between sessions. I think it can help with insight. I have a ton of members of my community who use ChatGPT to journal and to have conversations just to
Yeah.
get some feedback. And so I think there are definitely some positives with AI,
Mm.
and it will be very interesting if we were to return and have another conversation in a year,
Mm.
what has happened in that time.
Yeah. I think it's very supportive if somebody has anxiety. I think the kind of empathy, constant access to it, I think is wonderful. The only thing which I think could be difficult is if somebody not overestimates, but it can support a fantasy of something as well, which but I think most of the people I see, I would say, would kind of underestimate. So that they have that support during the week, just like YouTube videos and all is a wonderful thing, I think. largely.
No, I agree. And that is an
Yeah,
important point, is the fact that ChatGPT is programmed to please you.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
not there to challenge you.
No,
And that's why I'm hopeful that there'll be other like therapeutic AI that
yeah.
will come out of this, because I think we know there's a need, but we have to be very careful about how that's initiated, how that's regulated, the
Mm.
safety of patients first, obviously. But yeah, I agree with you. And I want everybody to know that it will just agree with you.
Yes.
It can feed your delusions if it wants to.
Which is exactly what I use it for.
We all do. I, this is actually good, isn't it? And it's like, yes, this is
Yes, it's
so important.
brilliant. Carry on doing that. Future plans for you? Where do you see things going in the future? What would you like to do more of?
I would love to speak more. That's really my goal.
Great. Do you come over to the UK or Europe, or is it mainly the US?
I would love to come to Europe. I think it's just been a trickier market, right? They're usually looking for local people, which I
Okay.
respect.
Yeah,
But if you have any leads, you send them my way. I would love to
I
come.
will. Okay. Just as a final question, I will often ask people what your favourite piece of life advice is. I know it's quite a big question, but is there a favourite piece?
My favorite piece of life advice.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many. I guess, and this is going to sound so generic, but it's always been something that I think when I think, oh, I'm being cringy or I'm being weird or like, ugh, is like there's only one you, and that's
Mm,
your superpower. So don't
mm,
downplay it. Don't pretend that it makes you bad and that being different is a bad thing, because I think being
mm,
different is what makes the world a beautiful place, right? It's like you can't paint uh I don't know, Monet without multiple colors and different
mm.
shades and different viewpoints and different shadows. And so just know that like your voice is just as important and your weirdness is what makes you wonderful. And so don't tamp that down. We don't need to be like everybody else. We just need to be ourselves.
Fantastic. It's amazing. Thank you for that. Um, I mean, that's just been wonderful. Thank you, Katie. So interesting. Brilliant to have that wealth of experience that you've built up over the years. I really appreciate you coming on. Below the video, we'll put links to the books and your YouTube channel, of course. You also, is there something about Ask Katie? Did I see that as well on YouTube? Is that,
Yes,
yeah.
I have a podcast called Ask Katie Anything.
As I say, it's been so lovely speaking to you. So lovely to finally get to meet you, having watched you for a long time. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That's okay.